Hi everyone, I'm Aaron Smith, NCIA co-founder and CEO, doing my best to fill in for Bethany in today's episode of NCIA Today while she enjoys a well-deserved vacation, so thank you all for joining me this week. First, a quick reminder to help with our efforts to pass the Safe Banking Act through the U.S. Senate. Please look up your senators' phone numbers today and give them a call to thank them for their support or ask them to co-sponsor this important legislation. Also, check out all the benefits of our newest top-tier evergreen membership for policy-focused cannabis companies looking to have a front row seat in NCIA's effort to end federal marijuana prohibition. Head over to thecannabisindustry.org/join to learn more about our evergreen membership and all of our membership packages, including blooming and seedling. Now, since I know you miss her while she's been on vacation, Bethany is checking in with NCIA Deputy Director of Public Policy, Rachel Kurtz-McElwain, about yet another issue related to marketing and advertising that is impacting the cannabis industry. Rachel tells us what's going on out in Seattle and how cannabis attorneys can get involved. Let's learn more.
Hey, Rachel, how's it going?
Hey, Bethany. Looks nice there.
Yep, it's pretty warm here in Denver this week for sure. I'm ready for it. How's it going in Washington State?
It's pretty nice. It's, nice spring weather, sun and rain makes the gardens beautiful.
Awesome, glad to hear. Well, we're heading our way into summer for sure. So good to see you again this week. You were just with us last week talking about the SMS text messaging crackdown that was impacting the cannabis industry and still is. And that's a huge issue with marketing. And there's so many marketing restrictions that the cannabis industry already deals with. And I hear there's something new, which is why you're with us this week. What is going on in Washington with Seattle Hemp Fest?
Yeah, well, it's been going on for a little while, but now they're appealing to the state Supreme Court. And it's Seattle Hemp Fest, along with a couple of the legal adult use cannabis licenses companies there. And they are pushing back on some of the regulations around advertising, like the locations, basically. So Seattle Hemp Fest is done in a couple parks that intersect along the Seattle waterfront. And the regulations in Washington are pretty onerous, where you have to be 1,000 feet from schools, parks, playgrounds, all that stuff. And it effectively cuts off a large part of the city. And with Seattle Hemp Fest being in a public park, it makes it really hard to do kind of sponsorship, have vendors, and that it's a huge hit on the Hemp Fest, which is a free festival, relies on vending and sponsorship. And it just kind of doesn't make sense too. It's like they're worried. The whole purpose of these is, to prevent youth use. But this is Seattle Hemp Fest. It's specifically for cannabis. And, yet at the same time, you could go to like a baseball game and it's sponsored by, but you look at the scoreboard and it's sponsored by Bud Light. So there's just this disconnect. And, and the cannabis industry is not trying, they don't want a free for all or anything. They get the purpose and acknowledge that that is a legitimate state interest. But at the same time, you have to treat everyone fairly, apply the law the same. And the Supreme Court's already ruled that, they can't restrict alcohol more than 500 feet, for instance. And alcohol regulations for advertising in Washington also, they don't allow it at public parks only if there's a playground or sports field. So that, the odds that kids will be there more, which wouldn't apply to the park where Hemp Fest is, for instance. So, that's, and that's just another example of why, like, the texting issue is such a big deal, because so many people in the industry rely on texting for marketing because of all the restrictions they face. So, it's a fascinating lawsuit that could have, pretty broad effects. And I'd love to be part of an amicus brief if any attorneys out there want to work on something like that.
Got it. Yeah, there's still an incredible disconnect, as you were saying, between cannabis marketing restrictions, advertising restrictions, and the alcohol industry, especially when the issue is youth prevention. So here we are educating the public, educating consumers and regulators alike that we should be treated more like alcohol and have less restrictions. So it sounds like attorneys who would like to help this effort can contact you and perhaps work on an amicus brief toward this lawsuit. Is that right?
Yes, for sure. It's, I have a link to the appellant brief on the blog I wrote. So people want to see kind of the fascinating First Amendment issues, state constitution issues, really where, similar industries can't be treated differently. There's a pretty broad First Amendment right when it comes to advertising. And, it's something to consider too. Like, I've been in so many, legislative and regulatory discussions, about how we want to regulate the industry. And I'm kind of amazed sometimes how we almost shoot ourselves in the foot, offering us these ideas to, regulate ourselves. And, especially when it comes to youth, we feel like we really need to be out front there. And I would say we want to do a better job than the alcohol industry in every way. We don't want to necessarily be advertising it for you to miss. So reasonable restrictions, we're fine with that. But when it really comes to, the people need to consider the effects of these rules and just the real world. Like, there's no, look at data, and there's no data that's showing, that we need those kind of regulations right now. And so, and when we look to also, regulating at the federal level, if we deschedule, I see people talking about, worrying about the advertising and branding and everything. But if you look at, alcohol regulations at the federal level, there really aren't that many. There's regulations around, this kind of purity and the labeling of, amount of alcohol and taxation and things like that. But when it comes to marketing and advertising, it's industry self-regulated. They have their own industry standards that are voluntary, and the vast majority of them follow that, and they work with the government on that, understanding, best practices and stuff. But it's a voluntary standard, and I feel like that's something that we could strive for. And it's good to have go ahead and put standards on your own business in place and show everyone that you are a good steward to the community. And then also it'll show regulators that we can manage this ourselves. We're not trying to target kids. We don't want to target kids. But there's some things that we should be able to reach adults.
Awesome. Well, thanks for an update on that issue, Rachel, and any attorneys that would like to jump in on this and perhaps work with Rachel, shoot her an email at rachel@thecannabisindustry.org. Thanks again, Rachel. Really appreciate checking in with you this week. I'm sure we'll catch up again soon. Enjoy the weather.
Yes. Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Okay. Thanks for that update, Rachel. And now for some breaking news. From our headquarters on Capitol Hill, I'm bringing on our NCIA's Director of Media Relations, Morgan Fox, to talk about today's reintroduction of the MORE Act.
any sort of changes from the last version that was already approved. We've already seen a couple of changes, including a really big one, which in the original passed bill would have allowed federal licensors to prevent anybody that had a felony on the record from being able to get a federal cannabis business license, which really goes against the intent of such social justice and restorative justice legislation. It looks like there's going to be some other positive changes in this bill as well. And our team is looking for areas where we might have to work on members of Congress a little bit to help improve this language as we get forward, or as we go forward in the debate on how to best make cannabis legal at the federal level.
It's great to see this comprehensive legislation and garnering so much support. Currently, it sounds like the bill is mostly backed by Democratic members of Congress, but it's my understanding that there's also a Republican bill that's out there that was introduced by Congressman Joyce a couple weeks ago. Can you speak to the differences between the legislation?
Well, the Joyce bill is really just a very bare bones descheduling bill. It would remove cannabis from the schedule of controlled substances. It has a couple of provisions that would mandate studies on cannabis related to pain and its impact on traffic safety, and would also allow physicians within the Veterans Administration system to be able to recommend cannabis in as applicable under state laws, which the MORE Act does as well. But unfortunately, the Republican bill does not really contain any noticeable social equity or restorative justice provisions. That seems to be the major sticking point for a lot of GOP lawmakers. And I think that it'll be very useful in terms of being able to find out exactly where lawmakers stand on the Republican side of the aisle when it comes to legalization, whether they support it in concept or whether they just have an issue with social justice provisions being attached to these, at which point I think that it will become much easier to put pressure on lawmakers to support some sort of a compromise measure, whatever that happens to look like. It's really good to see this much more fleshed out and much more robust measure being introduced now in the House, particularly as we await introduction of a similar comprehensive measure in the Senate from Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer.
Absolutely. It's great to be in a place where we can see such bipartisan support for the issue with just details that need to be worked out, between both parties. So Morgan, what's next for the MORE Act in Congress?
Well, as I mentioned, our government relations team is going to be looking for areas where it can and should be improved. We're hopeful that the bill will be taken up under consideration. It most likely has a number of committees that it needs to go through, just like it did last time. It's unknown at this point how many of those committees will waive jurisdiction just to keep the legislation moving along. But we expect a very robust debate among stakeholders in terms of potential amendments, as well as a lot of cross the aisle debate and deal making in order to get this bill moved. Largely because I think that a lot of conservative members of the House are starting to realize that this is something that their base and their constituents greatly benefit from and support by increasing margins.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Morgan. We will continue to report on the progress of this legislation, and thanks to our members that are making the advocacy that led us to this day possible. Supporting our efforts in DC is only one reason to become an NCIA member. So let's take a real quick look at some of the other reasons people are joining NCIA every day.
All right, now we clear for three minutes.
Okay.
That was awesome. Morgan, great job.
Yeah, that was cool. Thank you.
I'm gonna kick you out, Aaron. Kick you out, Morgan.
I take these earbuds out.
Yep, you're done with those.
We feel really grateful to NCIA for including us in the educational tracks the last 3 years. We've been at every Seed to Sale and most of the shows on the West Coast.
Every time we're here, I always have a sense that it's not just another one of these industry conferences, that it's actually that it is the industry's lobbying arm, and that it's an organization that is protecting all of us and fighting for the legal future that we all need.
At the end of the day, the most important and impactful thing for us is the community. It's really about the people that NCIA brings together, and the events like this one that NCIA organizes for us to gather.
If you're in this industry, NCIA is trying to influence it positively for you. If you're not speaking up, if you're not participating in committees, you're missing out on a huge window. Everyone wants change. Well, this is one of the ways you do it.
You don't have to be a member of the NCIA. You could just do nothing and let them do everything for you and fix all the problems that need to be fixed for the industry to work properly, and you could just sit on the sidelines. That would be fine, but it'd be better if you were a member.
All right, let's take a quick look at some of this week's content on NCIA's Industry Insights blog, in case you missed it. NCIA member Tara Vera proposes a plan for eradicating pesticide use in the cannabis industry without sacrificing the quality of your crop. Learn more in this week's member blog at thecannabisindustry.org. And don't forget that if you're a member of NCIA and want to share your insights with our community, you too can submit content to our website. Just contact us to learn how. And if you aren't yet a member, well, there's no time like the present to begin supporting the cause of cannabis reform and take advantage of exclusive member benefits such as this one. I want to take a moment to chat a little bit more about what's new and exciting at NCIA. In addition to our highly acclaimed weekly podcast, The Cannabis Industry Voice, we're also thrilled to see the success of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee's new podcast, The Cannabis Minority Report, with our host, DEI Committee Chair Khadija Adams. You can find that podcast wherever you get your podcasts online, and you could even catch it live on NCIA's Facebook page every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We also just can't wait to see all of you in person at our 3 trade shows being hosted in Detroit, Baltimore, and San Francisco later this year. As you know, NCIA's events took a break for over a year, but we're coming back with more energy than ever to bring you the most innovative expo floors, professional development opportunities, and networking with the industry's most influential business community. There's a lot happening behind the curtains already, so start marking your calendars. Our Midwest Cannabis Business Conference is September 22nd and 23rd in Detroit, Michigan. And our Eastern Cannabis Business Conference is coming up on December 7th and 8th in Baltimore. Plus, our flagship 7th Annual Cannabis Business Summit and Expo is heading to San Francisco December 15th and 17th of this year. Contact us now to learn about opportunities to secure your booth on the expo floor and plan to bring your team to all 3 shows. In the meantime, NCIA's weekly webinar series keeps you connected with the industry and up to date on the best practices and regulatory issues. And now is a great time to make sure that you are following all of our social media channels to keep up to date with our latest news in the cannabis industry. If you're a member of NCIA, log into NCIA Connect and spark up a conversation with your fellow NCIA members and colleagues today. Finally, be sure to download NCIA mobile app to keep up with the industry's leading association on your iPhone or Android device. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.